Brandon Krisztal. I've known Brandon for a very long time now. We met doing radio on CBS about 1 million years ago. And now he works for KOA as a sports anchor and reporter covering the Broncos. Brandon Krisztal, thank you so much for joining us, man. How are you? Good to have you on.
Hey, happy to talk to you, Damon and Ray. Been a fan of your work for a long time, so I feel like I've chatted with you here and there in the press box over the years, but good to talk a little football, and I think you characterized it in terms of the enthusiasm. I can't speak for Niners enthusiasm or fans' enthusiasm, but Broncos fans, every place I go, people are asking me, what's going on? What's wrong with the team? Why can't the coach? And the list just keeps going on with their issues compared to the Super Bowl plans that I think some Broncos fans were making for a trip to Phoenix based on Russ coming here and all the excitement with new ownership and new coach and everything.
Whose honeymoon in Denver was shorter, Chris Bryant's or Nathaniel Hackett's?
Well, what's great about Chris Bryant, who I'm almost certain I'll see at the Pearl Jam concert tonight, is they're closing out their tour here in Denver in a few hours. And
nice. Are they playing at Pepsi or Dick's?
Yeah. Well, now called Ball Arena.
Oh, okay, Ball Arena. Sorry.
They're there at the old Pepsi Center. But with the Rockies getting swept by the Giants, obviously, Chris Bryant nowhere near baseball activities. Although I did hear that he threw an end-of-the-year party a couple weeks ago for the team, or last week when they were...
I mean, he's got the cash. Why not?
Yeah, why not? A couple Thursdays ago, they had the party because they had a day off and were home against the Diamondbacks. Anyway, Chris Bryant's honeymoon ended quickly. Then you had Nolan Arenado come in for just 3 games. He hit a home run in Coors Field. That's one more than Chris Bryant hit this year at Coors Field. So his honeymoon ended quickly, and Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett, it's certainly, I don't say the honeymoon's over, but it's maybe on pause. They had to take a break in the middle of it. It has a chance to kick back into full swing if they can win decisively or in an exciting fashion, one way or the other, on Sunday night against Kyle Shanahan and the Niners.
How much damage has Nathaniel Hackett done to his own sort of reputation in town? And at this point, and this seems like a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, is it irredeemable?
I don't think it's irredeemable because they're 1-1, right? And they've got a stretch here over the next 3 games. If they can figure out a way to win on Sunday, it's going to be no easy task. I think the task was made harder with the injury to Trey Lance, and we're not going to necessarily dwell on that, but talking to players, coaches, people in that building, they were looking forward to trying to figure out how to game plan a young, inexperienced Trey Lance versus a guy that they know what they have in Jimmy G, but he obviously knows how to win a lot of games and run what Kyle asks him to run, which we know isn't maybe the full complement of the offense. So if they can beat the Niners, then they go to the Raiders. We don't really know what the Raiders are yet. They're going through their growing pains with Josh McDaniels, obviously, and his adjustment there. That defense is not very good there with the Raiders. And then 4 days later, they get the Colts on a Thursday night, and we certainly don't think the Colts are a Super Bowl caliber team right now based on what we've seen through 2 weeks. Certainly what we saw Sunday in Jacksonville, maybe the Jags are a little better. So they could turn around and be 4-1 here real quickly. And then I think people are looking at them a little differently. But it's funny because, I've been on the air a bunch with Alfred Williams the last couple of weeks and was on, he and I were on Monday and talking about this with the growing pains Nathaniel Hackett's going through, because Kyle Shanahan told us in his conference call yesterday, he went for it 4 times his first game because he was thinking like an offensive coordinator, even though he, like Nathaniel Hackett, has a dad who's a coach and been around the game forever. When your role changes, right, the approach changes, but you forget, I'm in charge of the whole thing, perhaps. The difference with what Kyle Shanahan went through, or Mike Shanahan when he was with the Raiders, a first-time head coach, or Sean Payton before Drew Brees got there, or Andy Reid his entire run in Philly, even with Donovan McNabb, where people didn't think he understood situations very well. But most first-time head coaches have crappy teams. Very few get a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback. Matt LaFleur did, and even though it wasn't super smooth with Aaron Rodgers, they still went 13-3 his first year, and Hackett had a front-row seat to that. And now you give Hackett a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, a guy who's certainly on that trajectory, 9 Pro Bowls in 10 years, won a lot of games, certainly has won a bunch against the Niners. I didn't realize his record was what it was until I saw it. But your learning curve needs to be accelerated. You don't get to go through the same growing pains and escape without the scrutiny that comes with having that guy at quarterback.
Brandon Krisztal covers the Denver Broncos for KOA in Denver. And look, we know Russell Wilson very well from all of his years in Seattle, and he's got almost as much ownage on the Niners as Aaron Rodgers has on the Chicago Bears. He has beaten them frequently throughout his career. I got a lot of respect for Russell Wilson, the player, Russell Wilson, the Instagram account, the personality. That's another discussion entirely, and we'll get to that eventually here. Are you surprised, though, Brandon, that he hasn't assumed more responsibility and command of how these games have ended, with calling timeouts when there are plenty to burn, or going over and sort of, just making sure that Hackett is on the same page as what his quarterbacking mind must be? I've been stunned by his laissez-faire approach to running the Denver Broncos early in his Bronco tenure.
Yeah, when you boil it down to that aspect, or when you look at that aspect, it is a little surprising because people have asked Russ, certainly this week, I don't know if he was asked last week, but hey, how much ownership do you feel like you have of your relationship with Coach Hackett to be able to say, hey, let's go for it here? Like, when are you going to assert yourself? Because his resume is what it is, and he goes to, hey, it's a process, we're learning, we can help him out by not getting penalties. Right, he goes into all the things he wants to talk about very, very much like a politician, even though that wasn't necessarily what he was asked or helping to solve. But you're right, especially in Seattle, and I know that was a weird game all the way around, not just how it played out on the field, but for him with the emotions and everything else and all that went into that game. But he should have spoken up more and said, look, I got this, let's go for it on 4th and 5, because I've never seen a kick over 60 yards here. He should have at least known that, right? That a kick's never gone beyond. I would
say I would have called a timeout and just gone up to him and said, look, man, they don't pay me $240 million to watch 64-yard field goals on 4th and 5.
Exactly. And be like, I've done this in this building a lot. I'm going to get us in the right play. I'm going to throw it to Cortland or Jerry Jeudy or whoever's open. We're going to move the sticks, and we're going to either have an easier kick or we're going to go score. And so you're right. And it'll be interesting to see this week, one, how the operation is, because part of the reason there's been struggles has been that Hackett is taking a long time to get the play in, which when you have an offense similar to San Fran's with all the pre-snap motions and everything else, you can't get into all of that quickly enough. And then you can't check out of whatever you want to check out of or into whatever you want to check into, because you're late getting out of the huddle. And so Hackett has to be better, but Russ has to maybe do all he can. Maybe he goes tempo a little more. He did mention that, because it took 3 or 4 times of us asking him, what can you do to help your coach? I asked him Sunday after the game. He said, well, we can have less penalties. Someone else asked him Wednesday in his press conference. He said, well, we can have less penalties. I said, okay, penalties notwithstanding, what can you do to help the play get in fast and get executed? He says, well, we can go tempo and we can change things up. So it'll be interesting to see, does he put more on his shoulders? Because we know in a 2-minute drill, he's been fantastic for his entire career, and he's made plenty of plays for the Seahawks in crunch time. You hope that for the Broncos' sake, they hope it doesn't come to that where week in, week out he's having to do it. But maybe he just does it a little bit, and maybe that's one of the ways they're going to make it a little easier on Coach Hackett, where he's not having to think as much, because Russ is like, I got this drive. Let me handle this. At the same time, against the Niners defense with all that talent and a good defensive play caller, I think, in D'Amico Ryans, you can't just let Russ do that all game. But Russ does need to assert himself more, because that is why they paid him $250 million.
Quarterback and coach aside, what do the Broncos do that will give the 49ers problems? And
they run the ball really well. Sorry, Ray. Didn't mean to catch up, but what else? Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, they run the ball really well. And I think Nathaniel Hackett's gotten in his own way in that regard, because he's trying to let Russ cook a little bit. And not that anyone's telling him that. I don't think the owners have even had that conversation, or George Payton, the GM, have had that conversation with, hey, we brought Russ in to win an MVP and this and that. I think that Nathaniel just feels obligated to make sure he's mixing in pass. But Javonte Williams, who is a really good young running back, and Melvin Gordon still has enough left in the tank, are averaging close to 5 yards a carry through 2 games. Again, against some not great teams in Seattle and Houston, certainly teams I don't think are going to be very good this year, and maybe that's almost what they want so they can get a better quarterback next year in the draft. But regardless, their rosters aren't awesome, even if they have a couple players, on each side of the ball. So this week, it'll be a true test. Can they run the ball against a really good defense, a really good front with a tackling machine in Fred Warner? And if they'll stick to it when it's working, and if they'll run the ball in the red zone. 11 of their 15 goal-to-go plays inside the 5-yard line have been passes. And one of the run plays was a pass that Russ checked to a run. Javonte Williams ended up fumbling because it wasn't communicated to the substitute right guard and Graham Glasgow. But that would have been 12 out of 15 plays in goal-to-go situations inside the 5 that were pass plays. So they need to run the ball better, because that is something that they do really, really well. And the other thing right now, because Bradley Chubb and Randy Gregory are healthy, they are getting after the quarterback because Draymond Jones inside, and with the youth inside for the Niners, if they're going to get to Jimmy G, it might be Draymond Jones, not DJ Jones, who's been great against the run, but Draymond Jones living in the backfield along with a healthy Bradley Chubb and on the men, but certainly an explosive Randy Gregory.
Brandon Krisztal from Denver. He covers the Broncos. Nice enough to join us here on 95.7 The Game. And there's our final question for you today. You're around him in the locker room. You're around him as he's walking on and off the practice field. Is Russell Wilson's persona misunderstood, or is he the human equivalent of a dad joke?
It's maybe a little bit of all of it. So the one thing is he's got this wife who has put out more hits than I realized. She has 8 top 10 hits in her musical career.
Wow.
But she's got 32 million Instagram followers. She has one number one, right? It's been a while. She's not prolific like Adele or Beyonce or somebody, right? She's not just pumping out, or Katy Perry, top 10 albums over and over and over. But she's a bona fide, pop star of note.
Absolutely.
There's a Kardashian feel to it. But they put stuff out constantly. I mean, they're putting things out on social media before the Broncos have a chance, because Russ has his own photographer that's around the team a lot. Not during practice necessarily, but certainly during camp. At the same time, I don't know if you guys knew this, but Adam Schefter has the most Twitter followers of anybody NFL related. Second is Russell Wilson, more than any team, more than any player, more than Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, you name it, Patrick Mahomes. He has 5.7, give or take, million Twitter followers, and that same amount for Instagram, plus his wife's 32 million Instagram followers, and they feel obligated to constantly feed that beast. They're running their own corporation, their own brand. I mean, they have people running it with them, but no one is telling them, hey, you need to post this every day, or you make sure you've got some content on there. Russ had a tweet that came out in the dead middle of practice today, and it's like, well, how's he pressing send on that? I know you can schedule tweets. But so, at the same time, with all of that going on, and then jet setting all over Europe and going to Monaco during Memorial Day weekend, Russ doesn't let the football suffer. And everybody in Seattle said the same thing, that he may not be able to connect with his teammates, but it's not because he's not around. He's first guy in, last guy out, and even when he's in Monaco on a Sunday and Monday, he was the first guy in that Tuesday after Memorial Day. So the football part is there. It's all the other stuff, and when you try to talk to him, you ask him one question. I asked him how much he likes learning the playbook, and he starts talking about legacy goals and Jerry Jeudy's career. And I was like, a simple, yeah, I'm a football nerd. I really like learning the playbook, because that's how Peyton answered that question. I like learning a new playbook. Russ answered it by giving me a 90-second diatribe about legacy goals and all of that. So if you can get past all of that, then there's, I don't know, a really good football player we think that has some left in the tank. It's certainly an interesting personality study, but maybe this is the best way to characterize who Russ is. Josh Kroenke gives him 4 tickets to Nuggets-Warriors playoffs, game 3, and they're sitting courtside. They're next to Reggie Miller on one side. The 2 other seats that they had available to them, they left empty. Now, they were with some teammates at games for hockey and basketball later on or whatever in suites, but when you can invite anybody. You can invite your coach. You can invite the GM. You can invite any teammate and his significant other, 2 teammates.
Could have brought you. Could have asked you. I'm sure you would have liked to have been there.
I would have. I was up in the press seating. I would have sat courtside.
Hell yeah.
And talked to Reggie and Kevin Harlan. Kevin's a fellow Jayhawk, so absolutely. But
by the way, the Hoosiers are rolling into Fog Allen this year. You're in trouble.
Oh, well, if we can make it work on our schedule, we should both go out there. But watch out for the KU football team, because we're so good, our coach is going to get hired away by Nebraska.
Stop it. Good to talk to you. Good to catch up with you.
Great talking to you guys. Damon, Ray, hope we see each other soon.